Hey guys, Brian Stevens here with the National Real Estate Post. Thanks for jumping on board today. We're going to talk about a couple of things specifically, and then we've got some sales tips that I think are going to help you out. First of all, we're going to talk about what the Dallas Federal Reserve Board says is pending, and that is a recession, a housing bubble. Well, the recession is definite, but a housing bubble is imminent. Is that really happening or is it not? We'll talk about that. The other thing we're going to talk about is the $12.3 billion additional dollars that HUD got for doing such a fantastic bang-up job this previous year. And so much more. Now, of course, if you're seeing us for the first time, we're part of the National Real Estate Post. You can always go to thenationalrealestatepost.com and subscribe, and we'll send you a daily 5-minute video that talks about the real estate and lending community, give you a little sales nourishment, and hopefully put a smile on your face to start your day out. That's kind of the goal. We've been doing this for the better part of 20 years now with hundreds of millions of views, so I think we kind of know what we're talking about. Also, if you have any show ideas, you can always hit me up with a text. There's my number, 707-330-1272. Please, I'm not going to pick up a phone call as we're heading into our weekend, and my weekend is going to be down. It's going to be down this weekend, and I'm totally looking forward to it. And of course, if you watch us with any regularity, sharing is caring. So hit the share button if you feel so inclined, because that helps us. And, and hey, listen, isn't it true? We're all looking out for ourselves now, aren't we? Okay. So let's start out with the budget. This one I find this one a little peculiar personally. So what we just discovered is the new budget coming out is going to increase what HUD is going to receive by. I'm going to pull this down a little bit. That looks a lot better, doesn't it? Okay. So the budget for HUD is going to increase by $12.3 billion. It's not $12.3 billion. It's going to increase $12.3 billion. You know, the thing that I was overwhelmingly struck by on this was not the fact that they're getting $12.3 billion additional dollars. It's really the notion that I was overwhelmed with is what is this going to really mean? What is this going to entail to help people out? Like giving HUD $12.3 billion, I just wonder if when we made this decision to do that, if we thought, okay, we're going to earmark this for certain things and we know in fact that it's going to work. Because it's not just to have this money earmarked for specific things, but it's the fact that even if you do have it earmarked, is that money going to make it to whatever your intended goals are? You can look at that. Listen, I don't want to beat up on HUD here too much because I think they're well intended, but they have a pretty long, rich history of going into communities, well intended, and just leaving those communities worse for wear, and doing it all on the taxpayer's dollar. So I don't know how well the whole thing is going to work out. But here's the whole thing with this, and excuse me, I'm going to have to turn my computer over here as I've got multiple monitors. When we look at this, HUD's budget right now, their budget this last year was $59 billion. So they're adding $12.3 billion to the 59 point something billion. Essentially, they're going to have a new budget of 71. Are you out of here? Out of here. So long. You have a good weekend. $71 billion. $71 billion. Billion with a B. The numbers are so astronomically high that you would think if you had any company that had the sole objective of taking $71 billion and using it for our national good, and really more specifically our national housing good, that money would be very clear to see the impacts in terms of what it's doing. Now, I know a lot of you are saying, well, that is taking place right now, Brian, and you're being too cynical about this. There's a lot of good that HUD's doing, and there's no doubt that there is some good that HUD's doing, but I don't know if it's necessarily as good as what we think it is. There's a quote here that I want to share with you. Now, and this is getting directly to my point, and I spoke a little bit about this yesterday, but now I'm seeing that HUD's getting this additional money. Well, obviously it's going towards something that's going to be housing related because HUD is a housing agency. Their mission statement, their purpose is to serve the underserved communities across our country and to bring affordable housing to folks. So here's what the Secretary of HUD said yesterday or a couple of days ago. And this is in her actuary. It's the actuary budget. It's also known as the HUD FHA 2021 Annual Financial Report to Congress. And she said, HUD Fudge Secretary Marcia Fudge said that this budget, this increase of the budget, is a sign that the administration, that would be the Biden administration, views housing as a foundational platform to help address urgent challenges facing our nation. It is worth pointing out, and by the way, this is something that we've looked at and we've talked about, there has been virtually nothing said from this administration about the housing crises that are facing Americans all across the country right now, in terms of what we're paying for rent, in terms of what we're paying on our mortgages, in terms of our lack of inventory and what the long-term ramifications of that are. But Secretary Fudge said that this money is a foundational platform to help. She said that this is a sign that the administration views housing as a foundational platform to help address urgent challenges facing our nation. Now, I said if only she felt the same way, and here's the reason why. In HUD's FHA 2021 annual financial report to Congress that discusses the health of the FHA's mutual mortgage insurance account, Fudge said in the actuary report that I just told you about, she said, here's what it is. Okay, here we go. HUD today released its fiscal year 2021 report to Congress on the financial health of the Federal Housing Administration, the FHA's Mutual Mortgage Insurance Fund. In addition to its emphasis on delivering relief options to homeowners financially impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, FHA continues to deliver on its mission of enabling homeownership for first-time homebuyers, low and moderate income homebuyers, and households of color. So we're talking about the health of the MMI fund. We're talking about this as it pertains to the MMI fund, which is sitting at over 8% right now, and the fact that they just got kicked down an additional $12.3 billion. But if you notice in that statement, what she said is, the money that we're receiving right now just shows that this administration is concerned about the issues of housing, and we are here to help with housing and housing and housing and housing. And, by the way, the MMI fund is doing good. And, and we're also here to help out with COVID relief. Well, wait a minute. COVID relief, does that really fall within the purview of HUD? The other thing that they talk about over here is green and renewable energy. And I'm like, is that necessarily falling within the guidelines or the auspices of what HUD should be doing at this point? And I found that very interesting how she blended these statements together. Housing, underserved communities, and we're here to help with COVID. And I bring this up because I've seen this before about a decade ago. Let's see, it was in 2010, I believe it was. I could be wrong on that, but I believe it was 2010 when we had the BP, the British Petroleum Gulf oil spill. You guys remember that? When that cap blew off that oil at the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico and oil was just spewing up for like a month, and it essentially killed all the marine life on the coast of everything inside the Gulf of Mexico. And which was, horrible. Absolutely horrible. At that point, Fannie and Freddie came in. And this was shortly after they basically took a bailout. But Fannie and Freddie rightfully came in and they allowed for a forbearance on people who were affected by the Gulf spill. All the industries that were completely torpedoed as a result of what BP did. But then the other thing that they did that I thought was crazy is we had a infrastructure bill and a BP bill. And what they did is they took Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac's guarantee fee, their G fee. This is the money that Fannie and Freddie collects from your borrowers indirectly because they pack it in, they build it into their pricing, but there is essentially 100 basis points packed into every Fannie Freddie loan that's ever written, and that 100 basis points then goes back to Fannie and Freddie, and that accumulative amount of money is what they have as their insurance pool in the event that one of those Fannie or Freddie loans default. It's an insurance policy, just like the Mutual Mortgage Fund for FHA is an insurance policy. You got one for Jenny, and you have one for Fannie and Freddie. Well, it stands to reason that the one for Fannie and Freddie is bigger, but it was interesting because this was right after they took the largest bailout in the history of our country. And then what the government did is they took the money that was earmarked for Fannie and Freddie to build up their reserves in the event of future foreclosures. If they had more reserves before the bailout last time, they wouldn't have needed a bailout. That makes sense, right? But what they did is they took that money and they reallocated that money to clean up the Gulf. To clean up the Gulf, where a private company, British Petroleum, had essentially sullied the waters. They were the ones who knocked the lid off of their little drilling oil thing at the bottom of the Gulf. This was British Petroleum's fault, not the United States taxpayer. Don't you find it interesting that the federal government took money from Fannie and Freddie's insurance pool, and they used that to clean the Gulf up on behalf of a private company right after they took a bailout? That bailout, by the way, which was taxpayer funded, all government money is taxpayer funded. And then they also took the money from people who were purchasing homes to clean up the Gulf from a mess made by a private company, and not even an American private company to boot. The whole thing was absolutely maddening. So it is a reallocation of funds, and our government likes to do that. You need not look any further than Social Security. And what I'm reading and what I'm seeing over here with Marcia Fudge and the HUD, it kind of makes me think the same thing. We're so happy we got another $12.3 billion. Now we have a $71 billion operating budget. That is just, that is just porno. It's just over the top, so ridiculous, $71 billion. And this really shows that this administration, who never talks about housing, who never talks about policy, is showing a commitment to help out underserved communities. And we're here to help with COVID relief. Listen, it's a noble cause to help out with COVID relief. It really honestly is. But stay in your own lane. I don't know. I found that whole thing really crazy. What do you guys think about that? Oh, yeah. So here's what we have is we have the budget over there. $71.9 billion is what we have for their budget. That's crazy enough, isn't it? Here's how they spend some of their money, by the way, just in case you're curious. $32 billion for their housing choice vouchers. $2 billion for their home investment partnership program. That's a partnership program. $50 billion in mandatory funding on low-income housing. By the way, all noble causes. Here's the thing. By the time the money that makes it down to low-income housing, how effective is it? Did you see that video the other day? Go look this up. It's crazy. When we talk about low-income housing and low-income housing advocates and homelessness and homeless advocates, Maxine Waters is arguably, she runs the House Financial Services Committee, doesn't she? Or she's on the Senate Banking Committee, one of the two. I can't remember. And her district down in Southern California is one of the more impoverished districts in Southern California, which is crazy because she lives in like a $50 million mansion. But did you see the other day when she was going down there and speaking on issues of homelessness, and a lot of the local homeless folks down there, thought she was handing out Section 8 vouchers, and so they showed up at her rally, and she got so frazzled at her own rally trying to talk about how she's helping homelessness. She saw so many homeless people there. She told them all, you all just need to go home right now. You all need to go home right now. They're homeless. She's talking about homelessness. She's a leading advocate. Anyways, I don't know. It's my sense of humor. Okay, so for low-income vouchers, by the way, all noble causes here. $113 million for FHA and home for complimentary low and down payment assistance pilot programs to expand home ownership opportunities for first-generation and low-wealth first-time homebuyers. I actually really kind of like this program. I would love to see this program work. What it's really directed towards is African Americans and trying to bridge the wealth gap through home ownership. If you look at home ownership ratios right now, African Americans are wildly underrepresented, and it becomes very difficult to pass on wealth when you don't have any wealth to pass on. Owning a house is the greatest opportunity for, building wealth. And so if you can build up generational wealth, what they're trying to do is just offer a pilot program that's going to help that bridge that gap. And I think it's a really noble cause. Again, I just wonder how effective it is. And by the way, Raising Cain, it is funny as hell. Did you see that? It just cracks me up beyond belief. It's not surprising. You know the other one, by the way, I don't want to digress too far off of this, but do you remember when everyone was pissed at Angelo Mozilla, the guy who ran Countrywide? It's like, he's a cheat, he's a skate, he's a liar, he's a this, he's a that, he's horrible. And then, my God, because of people like Angelo Mozilla, who ran Countrywide and torpedoed the economy of the United States and did this and did that, we got to have the Dodd-Frank law, and we're going to get Dodd-Frank, and we're going to get the CFPB, and we're going to bring these type of, shysters in line, and we're going to punish them. Yeah, did you know that Angelo Mozilla, who ran Countrywide, he had a program called the Friends of Angelo, where you would get a rate that was lower than market, where you didn't have any underwriting. Basically, it was just free money. It was for Friends of Angelo. Did you know that Christopher Dodd of the Dodd-Frank bill actually took out a Friends of Angelo's loan from Countrywide? He actually took one out. Did you know the president of Fannie Mae took one out? Did you know the president of Freddie Mac took one out? Did you know the president of Ginnie Mae took one out? It is a veritable who's who in the Senate Banking Committee and the House Financial Services Committee. They were all taking free money from Angelo Mozilla, who ran Countrywide at the time, and out of the other side of their mouth, they were saying what a shithead he is. It kind of makes me wonder, like, if we are to believe the things that we're hearing right now that are taking place in wars, but I'm not getting into that. Okay, so $900 million in resources across HUD's multifamily housing program for modernization activities aimed at energy efficient and resilient to climate change impact. Again, very noble. But when we have, guys, I don't know if you know this, we have a veritable epidemic on our hands right now. We do. In housing, our short supply of housing. There was a story today, it's like, when they were talking about, it was the Dallas Federal Reserve. We'll talk about this in a moment. They say, well, the Dallas Federal Reserve said, the housing market, much like 2008, has become unhinged. It's become unhinged. I'm like, no, we don't have a housing bubble because home prices are unhinged, because mortgage rates are unhinged, supply lines are unhinged. Everything is unhinged right now. Until we start hinging things and fixing what's broken, home prices are going to keep going up, and that's an epidemic. Because we're getting to a point right now where rents and certainly mortgages, especially the down payments, because there's really no healthy down payment assistance program on a national basis that's acceptable or being used readily, until we start to address some of these issues. Your average college graduate coming out of college is not going to be able to rent anything. It's crazy. The whole thing is unhinged, but I'll get back to that. Okay, so I guess the reason I'm bringing it up is I understand that we need to be dealing with resiliency when it comes to climate change impact, but do we need to be dealing with this right now when we have a housing epidemic that's on our hands? HUD Secretary Marcia Fudge said it in her statement. So here's what it is. We just talked about this a moment ago. We don't need to go into this, but this is the FHA released their 2021 annual financial report to Congress, and this right now, what you're looking at, is where she's discussing the Mutual Mortgage Insurance Fund. And this is where she's saying in one side of her mouth, we love what the administration is doing. We're so super happy that we've got all this extra money, and it shows their commitment. And oh, by the way, we're helping with COVID. What does that have anything to do when it comes to our mutual mortgage fund account? Okay. So I want to move on to... Okay, so I'm going to move on to our other story here real quickly. And by the way, I really do appreciate you guys sticking around today. It's, especially with those of you who are on the East Coast right now. It's been kind of a long week. Okay, and you know what? It shows your commitment to your business, the fact that we're sticking around and we're doing this. Okay, so as I told you before, I thought this was interesting. But the Dallas Federal Reserve thinks that we're heading right towards a housing bubble, much like we had in 2008. Their argument is that, here's their argument, real house prices adjusted for inflation, have steadily increased in the United States since 2012. Further acceleration in the pace of housing price appreciation began before the pandemic, but has strengthened noticeably since early 2020. For prospective buyers for prospective buyers and sellers, as well as policymakers, knowing the state of housing market is imperative. Using a novel statistical toolkit for assessing the health of the United States housing market in real time, we, being the Dallas Fed Board, we argue that the underlying causes of the run-up differ from those during the last housing boom, which preceded the 2007 to 2009 global financial crisis. However, there is a growing concern that the United States housing prices are again becoming unhinged from fundamentals. So, as I said, yes, I think I don't think we're in a housing bubble. I don't think anybody would suggest, who in their right mind would think we're in a housing bubble. And yes, I think right now I'm smarter than the Fed Reserve when it comes to this, but I do think that they are right. As I said before, housing prices are unhinged from the fundamentals. Our housing supply line is unhinged. Our demand is unhinged. Rates are unhinged. But even if you don't think that rates are unhinged, guys, if we didn't have the Federal Reserve buying every mortgage-backed security to the tune of like $70 billion a month, yeah, adding to their bottom line right now, rates would be in the sevens. And it's unhealthy that it requires the Federal Reserve to buy every mortgage-backed security in the country in order for rates to stay as low as they have. So yes, I do think rates are unhinged there as well. And now that they're trying to pull back from that at absolutely the wrong time, what we're going to see is we are going to see a run-up in interest rates. That is, if the Fed stays its current course. So in short, lock them today if you have them, or lock them on Monday when you have them. Government entitlement programs are unhinged as well. Government entitlement programs, a lot of the stuff that we're looking at right now are climate change programs. That is not going to the core narrative of what HUD needs to be, which is serving underserved communities, helping with pandemic relief. That is not at the core of what HUD needs to be doing. We're too scattered. If you're trying to do 50 things at once, you can't do one thing good, and I think that's where they're at. So when it comes to the Fed board, you might have seen that we have a potential housing bubble in front of us. I don't see that happening. The numbers are nuts. None of the other statistical data would support it. I think I told you guys a couple of days ago. Back in 2018, we had 2.5 million we were 2.5 million properties short of what we needed in terms of supply to have a healthy housing market. That was in 2018. So we've been working diligently to fix that problem, and now we are 3.8 million properties deficient in terms of what we need to be. In short, we have more properties, we are now worse off in terms of our shortage of demand by well over 1 million properties than we were just 4 short years ago. We are in fact going in the wrong direction, not the right direction. So sure, rates can go ahead and slow down the housing market, and sure, rates are going to go up, but all that's going to do is it's not going to stop the demand. We simply have too much demand for too few homes. All that's going to do is make everything way more expensive and out of the reach of a lot of us. And here's what I've always said, guys. If I can't afford the price of ticket to the concert, I don't give a shit who's playing. And right now, so many Americans cannot afford a price of the ticket to the housing market, and it's leaving a lot of people disillusioned right now, and they're checking out of this, and that's sad because we need participation. Recession is absolutely on the horizon. Raising Cane, you're 100% right. Do you think that the recession happens, the price of real estate is going to hold its value better than? Yeah, it's just because we have too much demand. I just did an interview with Barry Habib a couple of days ago on the National Real Estate Post, my show. So if you guys go to the nationalrealestatepost.com, a couple of days ago, I ended up doing about a half-hour conversation with Barry Habib. He's great at this stuff, and we talked about it. And yeah, even in past recessions, if we look at overall how housing fares in recessions, it does surprisingly better than you think it would. The assumption is that prices are going to go down. Prices don't go down really as much as interest rates go down. So yes, if we jump into a recession, we'll probably see some relief in terms of where rates are at. That's only if the Federal Reserve continues buying mortgage-backed securities. But because our demand is so outpacing what our supply offers in terms of new housing or even existing housing, this is going to be a problem for quite some time. And because it's going to be a problem, Housing prices, even in a recession, are going to continue escalating. Now, this is going to sound really morbid and mean. I'm not trying to sound morbid, and I'm not trying to sound mean, because I love my mom just as much as you love your mom. But the fact is that the baby boomer generation, my mom's generation, they're now in their 70s. And that biggest generation ever is who all own their homes right now. The largest, well, now it's the second largest generation ever. They're all coming to age, and I think we're going to start to see. Again, I'm not trying to be macabre or dark or about this, but I'm just being pragmatic about like opportunities for additional inventory. And you're just looking at an aging generation. That's at the time it was the biggest generation ever. I mean, that might be our biggest opportunity for housing relief. Yeah, you agree and tell your clients the same thing. Yeah, it is. And here's the thing is whatever you think is expensive today is a hell of a deal tomorrow. So top dollar today is a great deal tomorrow. Property values are going up. And listen, I have been saying we are so incredibly, remarkably dysfunctional in terms of the housing market right now. Here's what I said, Raising Cane, if you haven't watched my lives on it with any regularity. Our housing market is like a swimming pool. You ever see a swimming pool that's absolutely beautiful? It's pristine, it's blue, it's gorgeous, the sun's just shining off of it. But then you check your chemicals in your pool, and your chemicals are way off. Well, anybody who's ever owned a pool before knows if your chemicals are that far off, it doesn't matter how blue your pool is. That sucker's going to be green in 2 days. Well, our housing market is like that right now. It's beautiful. Prices are going up. Everything's great. But we're not checking the chemicals. We're not looking under the hood, because if we did, we would realize that something sour is going to happen in the future. What we're doing right now is unsustainable. I don't know how or where we crack. I just know it has to eventually happen. But the foreseeable future, man, it's going to keep going up. All right, guys. With that said, I'm gonna let you go. I'm gonna be like a tree and leaf, man. I'm gonna start my weekend. I've got a branch that fell down. I got to work on that this weekend. I'm gonna put an air conditioning in my office right here because it's getting too damn hot for the summer. Everybody in my office needs to work when it's like 55 degrees. So we're gonna get that done. Hey, listen, reach out anytime. Send me a message. You got my number. Send me a text. Let me know what you guys want to talk about, and or anybody you want me to talk to. We'll certainly go ahead and run them down. With that said, you guys have a great weekend. Stay safe, and we'll talk soon. Later.